Today, we have a special episode where we will discuss the bold and courageous words of South African Minister Naledi Pandor regarding the situation in Gaza and the need for greater unity and action among African and other progressive nations worldwide. Minister Pandor recently gave a rousing speech at the International Trade Union Conference, where she made a powerful statement about the moral authority, or lack thereof, displayed by certain countries regarding the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. She recounted an incident at an African Union meeting where she strongly objected to a proposal for Israel to become an AU observer member. Though she faced pressure, Minister Pandor stood firm and insisted this could not stand. In her speech, she lamented that when she looked to her fellow African nations for support in rejecting Israel's observer status, only a handful joined her, while many others stayed silent due to political and economic influence from outside powers like Israel itself. Minister Pandor boldly called out Israel as one of the oppressive regimes that continue to leverage their financial clout and turn a blind eye to African countries. She made it clear this is a situation she cannot tolerate, and the burden should not lie solely with progressive governments and organizations. Minister Pandor urged trade unions worldwide, even small or weak ones, in places like the United States, to make clear statements rejecting the words of leaders like President Biden if they lend support to tragedy and conflict. She said, progressive unions and nations, globally, must rekindle their passion and activism that was so vital during South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle. With such limited mobilization and action in the current progressive movement, Minister Pandor wondered where all those powerful leaders have gone and why they are not doing more to rally support. In Minister Pandor's view, progressive voices are being continually undermined and silenced. She stressed the need to revive and reorganize the progressive movement after having its voice stifled for so long. Strategic planning and converting inspiring speeches into concrete actions and outcomes are critically important. Minister Pandor called upon South Africa's largest trade union, the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa, to take up a new leadership role. She urged them and other unions to reach consensus on a bold proposal that no union would handle Israeli goods or transport them in any form for a full month. This daring step would test the movement's ability to unite and demonstrate uncompromising dedication to the cause. She asked trade unions to exercise their prerogative and refrain from handling Israeli goods to show how unique they are and draw attention to the situation. Minister Pandor pointed to upcoming United Nations resolutions and the need to remain vigilant to ensure they align with correct principles and assist the Palestinian people. She highlighted the critical need for medical supplies, like bandages and medicines in Gaza. In a rallying cry to all 62 million South Africans, Minister Pandor pleaded with them to gather food or medical donations that her department could facilitate transporting to Egypt to provide vital assistance across the border into Gaza. She emphasized that going forward, action is imperative. We need more than just talk and debates. All organizers, strategists, and everyone must set aside differences to work collectively for change. Unity is key. Transitioning in her speech, Minister Pandor noted the unique position of the Global South amid rising tensions worldwide. While the South cannot be regarded as one uniform entity, her experience convinced her of its potential for fundamental change if focus shifts away from relying on and following the North. Minister Pandor argued for concentrated effort to uplift and act in the interests of the South, as the world has long been divided into North and South, with the South providing even raw materials to fuel the North's development. However, she detected a worrying global trend defined by increased opposition to advocacy for international collective action and global collaboration. There has been a resurgence of unilateralism and right-wing nationalism. Populism and collective punishment of Gaza represent what is happening, in Minister Pandor's view. She called for greater involvement of media to present a balanced perspective, expressing concern about inconsistent reactions to killings of journalists based on their origins. She cited the lack of attention to the killing of Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, compared to the likely massive outcry if Western journalists were killed in Ukraine. The world needs to recognize this double standard. Minister Pandor also noted, global inequality is widening and the unfair outcomes sustained by the South. She condemned the way the global economy has developed with selective disregard for international law and rules that poor nations must adhere to, often at the cost of basic services for their people. As an example, she pointed to Ghana undergoing financial crisis and then reporting economic growth after taking IMF loans, but with detrimental effects on public services like education, healthcare, and housing. In addition, Minister Pandor lamented the failure of developed nations to keep promises to the developing world, along with tendency to evade accountability on issues like the climate crisis that hugely impact the global South. She emphasized it is unfair to expect Southern nations to restrain their development when they have had far less time to do so compared to Western counterparts. Minister Pandor firmly objected to application of double standards, seeing it as an outgrowth of a global system designed by the powerful to benefit them while disadvantaging other nations fighting for their rights. She advocated for self-determination and the need for social movements to intervene in support of the Palestinian people, especially given the biased media coverage of horrific violence witnessed. Minister Pandor provided another case of the near-unanimous support in the UN General Assembly by over 150 member states for stopping the illegal U.S. economic embargo on Cuba. Yet the blockade of the Cuban people continued, restricting access to life-saving medicines and ability to trade normally like other sovereign nations. Such injustices needed the global South and progressive forces worldwide to rally public support for oppressed peoples like Cubans and Palestinians. However, Minister Pandor discussed how conservative groups like AfriForum in South Africa aided appeals to overturn court decisions, allowing her department to provide humanitarian aid to Cuba. She expressed frustration at the lack of active opposition from South African progressives, warning that initiatives like these are weakening progressive gains in South Africa around affirmative action and more. According to Minister Pandor, addressing today's global challenges requires a new approach. While imperfect, she believed the UN's multilateral architecture with nation-states as the core political body for security and development decisions must be maintained. However, she argued for thorough reform and democratization of the UN system, starting with the Security Council that gives 5 nations disproportionate control. The current global power distribution makes little sense nearly 8 decades after the UN's founding. Minister Pandor warned that many council member countries have contributed to various world problems. She advocated for embracing rising powers in global leadership rather than suppressing them. Silence is no longer acceptable. Influential voices must convey principled opinions. Minister Pandor emphasized the need for economies to benefit society and implement environmental safeguards. In her view, today's crises demand coordinated international responses and seizing opportunities that fragmentation provides for advocates of economic justice to jointly develop a truly progressive global alternative. International progressive forces should aggressively promote inclusive multilateralism to impact debates and decision-making in other countries and powers. This restructuring attempt must include reform of the global financial architecture and founding new institutions, not maintaining the post-WWW2 Bretton Woods bodies, like the World Bank and IMF, that entrench Northern dominance. Rather than relying solely on multilateral development banks, Minister Pandor said, "We need effective institutions to address South-South cooperation and the challenges countries face in meeting long-term objectives. Their development mandates must be responsive to public health emergencies and climate change impacts. She urged that the IMF in particular be repurposed to provide counter-cyclical financing, debt relief, and liquidity assistance for countries in need. Minister Pandor also highlighted South Africa's involvement in BRICS as an effort to build a more balanced global governance system that is representative. This included initiatives like the BRICS-led New Development Bank to provide emerging economies more control over lending and policy space to address pressing issues. She emphasized the value of emerging countries holding the G20 presidency in succession over recent years, from Indonesia to India and Brazil next, to focus these forums on development. With South Africa set to hold the G20 presidency in 2025, Minister Pandor said this is a key moment for leading economies to positively impact the Global South and agenda. The time is now to champion meaningful change and secure long-term needs of the global community, as was done over 50 years ago by the non-aligned South. Goals like reforming the international trade and financial systems, recognizing sovereignty over natural resources, and building global institutions for peace and security, not military pacts that divide humanity, remain valid. Minister Pandor expressed concern about the troubling trend of weaponizing parts of the oceans, like the Indo-Pacific, seeking to impose unilateral control that undermines possibilities for peace and development. She believed South Africa should keep contributing to creation of a global progressive movement that advances interests of Africa and the wider world. Minister Pandor emphasized the importance of energizing people out of distraction and pushing for progressive forces to intervene with hope, vision, and tangible pathways for international political action. Minister Pandor certainly laid out a bold vision, and some may wonder if the African Union today primarily serves Western interests rather than Africa. Should South Africa leave the AU to create a new Pan-African organization that is fully independent? Let us know your thoughts on Minister Naledi Pandor and her powerful message. If you want to see more content like this covering raw truth, culture, and history, please subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for the next episode.